Today's lesson is very exciting in that it has to do with a coin in the fish's mouth. And for you to become acquainted with the story, shall we open our Bibles to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 17, and read verse 24. It says that when they were come to Capernaum, they that received the tribute money came to Peter and said, "Does your master pay taxes?" Peter responded, "Yes." And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him. It actually just means there that Jesus got ahead of him, that Jesus responded to a question that he was going to ask and hadn't had time to ask it yet. Jesus knew of the conversation by the Spirit that had taken place otherwise. And Jesus spoke to Peter, saying, "What thinketh you, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or of strangers?" Peter responded and said, "Strangers, of course." Jesus said unto him, "Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea," and that was the Sea of Galilee, "cast a hook and take up the fish that first cometh up. And when you have opened his mouth, you shall find a piece of money. You take it and you give it to them for you and for me." Jesus came into one of his favorite cities after he left Nazareth, which was Capernaum. Capernaum at that stage in history was a commercial and a social center for the people. It was a trade route coming from the far east into the near east, even from as far away as India to the Mediterranean peoples. And so one of the remarkable stories of history, which is the coin in the fish's mouth, took place there. At this entrance into the Galilee area, they had two kinds of customs. They had the Roman customs there, who took money up for Rome. You had to pay duty on the goods that you were bringing in. And they had the publicans there, who were Jews, and they were collecting tribute or temple money. And that was what they asked him about, was the temple money. So in our study today, the miracle part of it is a miracle of nature. It has to do with a fish and a coin. It's very remarkable to me how many different kinds of miracles that Jesus performed. And that he had miracles of nature just as strong as miracle of human persons. And showed himself the God of nature as well as the God of our own personal lives. So in this one we have Jesus paying tribute or paying taxes. And the payment was not to the Roman powers, but to the publicans for the service of the temple and defraying the expenses of the synagogues that would be in that area. Now Christ was technically exempt from this taxation of the temple for the simple reason that he belonged to God and the temple belonged to God. And being God's son, as he said, who pays? The children? Or the strangers? And he said, the strangers pay it. But Christ waived his privileges and was willing to pay his tribute. And the tribute was paid by a miracle. Some want to stress very strong the poverty of Jesus. I don't know that he discussed this with his treasurer, who was named Judas. There might have been a plenty of coins in the bag, but he didn't bother his treasurer. He went straight to miracle to perform it. But what he was teaching here, you find in Romans 13:7, render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear is due, honor to whom honor is due. He was teaching submission. Jesus wanted to have a life that everybody could look at it 2,000 years later and say, hey, that was sure good, and that was sure right. He didn't want to escape something that somebody later would say, hey, he didn't really pay his full share. Jesus wanted to do his life so beautiful and so well until it didn't matter what generation was reviewing his life. He'd have to say, a good life. So he paid taxes. You won't be able to get your tax money this way, so remember that. The tax was just a small sum. It was a half a shekel. And it was approximately 15 cents. So we're not talking about a great amount of money. The Jewish custom, this Jewish custom dates way back. It says 1491 years before Christ. It started in Exodus 20:13. This they shall give everyone that passeth among them that are numbered, half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary, and 1/2 shekel shall be the offering of the Lord. And so they went clear back to the law of Moses in order to pick this up, and they were enforcing it in Jesus' day. But in Matthew 17:24, it tells us there that they commanded Peter, does your master do what we have to do? Does he pay his part of the taxes? And without asking Jesus, he said, oh yeah, sure he does. Then later he said, I better check on this and see. And he found that he was absolutely correct, that Jesus was willing to accommodate the Old Testament laws, and so he gave what should be given. This miracle of nature is so exciting to me, of how Jesus can supply any need of any kind, of any nature, that he has a capacity to do it, and that he supplied this need in a miracle way. There are two defined qualities in this miracle today. One is omnipotence. Now, only God could have put the coin there. It had to be placed there some way or another. Place it there for Jesus. And that is omnipotence. And omniscience, only God could know just where it was. And so we have two great forces and powers of God. And it's so interesting that the first miracle had to do with a Roman coin. The Jews really didn't like the Roman coins, because every time they used the Roman coin, it advertised the fact that they were in slavery to the Romans, and that they didn't have any money of their own, that they were doing business with foreign money. And so it was a thing they didn't like. But this miracle had to do with a foreign money, a Roman coin. And this miracle had to do with a fish in the water. Now that is the most unlikely situation that could happen, you know. But that's what miracles are all about. The most unlikely situation that could happen was that there was a fish in the Sea of Galilee harboring a Roman coin. And the Lord Jesus said to Peter, you go to the sea. You cast in a hook. Now, number one, that wasn't his usual manner of fishing. He fished with a net, remember? He was a net fisherman. And a net fisherman likes to see 15, 20, 30, 40, 50. And in one case, Peter got 153 in one net being pulled in. And so, you know, it's quite a come down to come from 153 down to one. But he said, take a hook. You say, why did he say that? Well, he didn't need 153 coins. Are you still here? He could have said, take your net and every fish you catch will have a coin. Oh, Peter to become Judas pretty quick, he'd have had a bag full. But Jesus says, don't take the net. I want you to take a hook and a line, which wasn't exactly his form of fishing. But he had caught thousands and thousands and thousands of fish and had never seen a coin yet. No fish had ever had a coin. He could have a minnow inside that he was eating, but no fish that he had ever found in that sea had a coin in its mouth. This must have been a different road for him to travel. Being a veteran fisherman, he was going to take a fishing line with a hook, and not the second fish or the third fish, but the first fish would have the coin in his mouth. How excited would you have gotten about that? You think he lost any time getting down there? He should have he told those other boys, I got something to tell you. Says, I'm going to go throw a line in right over there, and I'm going to catch one fish, and there'll be a Roman coin in that fish's mouth. Now I can hear John and Andrew say, shucks. Who told you that? Jesus did. Uh-oh, it'll work. If Jesus told you, it'll work. But said, if you thought this up yourself, you're nutty. Because we've been catching fish out of this sea all of our lives, and no fish yet has ever produced coins. How many believe God can do miracles? Amen. You know, if we didn't limit God, he could do a lot more than he has done. Amen. And we limit God by telling him it won't work. If Peter just said, now wait a minute, you're a carpenter, and I am a veteran fisherman, there had never been a coin. That fish would have lost that coin pretty fast out there, and it'd still be down there at the bottom of the sea. He had to believe in order to make that thing work. Even though it had never been done before, and even though his experience proved otherwise. You know why you don't have miracles take place? You got too much experience. How can God do this when I have done? Wait a minute. God can do something new anytime he wants to. And God can bring into being that which is not. I prophesy to you that the months and years ahead of us is going to have more miracle related to it than all the months and the years behind us. That miracle is in front of us. Mighty miracles. Glory to God. Exciting miracles. They're before us. I had a miracle with money one time. I was in Hong Kong, China, and the war was on over there. And Mr. Howard Carter and I were there together, and he was teaching gifts of the Spirit and laying hands on people to receive the gifts of the Spirit. And I was preaching Jesus to get people saved. Then after that, I'd lay my hands on them to get them healed. And it was real interesting. It's the first time I had been in the Orient, and I had a whole sea of faces, and they all looked alike. They all had black hair. They all had black eyes. They were all Chinese, full-blooded Chinese, and dressed very much alike. And when I started praying for the sick, I was declaring that they were doing the circle for me, going around, because I couldn't tell them apart anyway. And they were going around, and I said, is there any end to this? How many times have you been through this line already, you know? Gathered in the city of Hong Kong at that time were missionaries from all over China. First to be in the great conference there with Brother Carter and myself. And then because of war, the whole The whole nation was at war, fighting in several different places. In the north and back in the backside and the front side, they were having terrible war at that time. And as the missionaries all got together, they said, you ought to go to Tibet and preach. And says, they need you in Tibet. And Brother Carter said, oh yeah, that would be good. And I said, yeah, sure, that'd be good. The only problem was I had 10 cents in the world. Say 10 cents. 10 cents. I wasn't broke. Now they were talking hundreds and maybe thousands of dollars, and I had 10 cents. Now Mr. Carter and I had a covenant that we had made together in Australia, that we would travel together but never discuss money in any form. He says, I'm a man of faith, and I've never discussed money with any human in my life. He had never been married, of course. And I hadn't either. So he said, when we are traveling, if we preach in the same meeting, I'll give you half of the offering, I'll take half. But says that's all that we ever have to do with money. Says, when it comes to buying a ticket, you'll buy yours, and I'll buy mine. When you need something, you go buy it. When I need something, I'll go buy it. But we never discuss money. I live by faith. Well, I said, I was 21. I said, yes, I live by faith too, except I didn't know what the word meant. That's a problem with some people. And so the devil began to make it difficult for me. He said, what do you mean going to Tibet? You only have 10 cents. You can't ride the streetcar downtown. You don't have the money to ride a streetcar, much less go to Tibet. I says, I'm going. I am going to Tibet. I am going to preach. I'm going with Howard Carter to Tibet. And the devil kept saying, you can't go. And I kept praying for those people every night, round and around, praying for the sinners and then praying for the sick people. And the devil kept telling me, you can't go, you only got 10 cents. You can't go. Then one night a Chinese lady walked up and said, you're going to Tibet? Now you have to watch. You see where your faith runs out. I said, yes, I am going. If I'd have said, I don't know, God said, yeah, that's right. And you won't go because you don't know. But I said, yes, I am going. And she said, up in Tibet, they have very little food. And the kind of food they have would kill you. And says, my husband is a general of an army up there. And said, if you don't carry some food with you, you'll die. She said, I brought 3 cases of fruit from California, canned fruit. Says, if you eat a can a day, you'll come back alive. Says, that'll save you. And she brought the 3 cases and set them on the platform, and I heard the devil laugh out loud. Said, what do you think you're going to do with 3 cases of fruit with your dime? I said, but I'm going to have enough. He said, you don't have it now. And says, whatever offering they give you, you're going to split it in half. Says, it wouldn't take you to Hanoi. We had to go down into Vietnam to get a little train that went up through the backside of Tibet, of China, to get into Yunnan province. And from there, we took mule back up into Tibet. And he said, the offering they give you here would never take you on that boat for 3 days across there, much less to Tibet for 3 months. And so I said, yes, I'm going. I took that fruit to my room where I was staying, and I put it over in the corner. And every time I look at it, the devil would laugh out loud. He said, you're going to eat that fruit in Hong Kong. And I said, no, I'm going to eat that fruit in Tibet. He said, no, you're going to eat the fruit in Hong Kong. He says, you only got 10 cents. I said, but the Lord's got plenty. Now, if you think people of faith have it easy, that's because you never tried it. Amen. Whether it was Elijah or Elisha and the rest of them. So a few more days went by. I kept praying for the sick and praying for the healing people. And Brother Carter kept praying for people to get the baptism and working with the missionaries and with gifts of the Spirit. And we were really having a tremendous conference. It was almost a nationwide conference, and we were really having a great time with it. And we would even meet in different auditoriums to carry this thing on. But when we, after church, would go up to one of the missionaries' place, we had a great big long table, and 15 or 20 missionaries would be talking, and it was all about Tibet. And they'd look at me and say, going to Tibet? And I'd say, yeah, going to Tibet. Look at Brother Carter, yeah, I'm going to Tibet. And I had 10 cents in my pocket. I kept it with me all the time so I would never be broke. And so we hadn't received any offering yet. We were going to get the offering on the last day of the meeting, so we hadn't gotten any offering from the people there. On about a Friday night of the crusade, that same little lady came walking up, Chinese lady. And she said, you don't know me, I'm sure. I said, well, I've seen you. You gave me the fruit. She said, yes, that's right. She says, now my husband is a general of one of the large armies that's fighting. And I was sent here to Hong Kong to either die or to be operated on for cancer to see if they could get me to live. Says, I came here to be in the hospital. And said, the first night you opened this meeting, someone said, they pray for the sick over there. And I came over and you prayed for me. I went back to the hospital the next day and they x-rayed me, but they could not find any cancer. So I came back the next night for more prayer. Says, then I went back to the hospital the next day and I said, x-ray me again. And they did. They said, no, there's no cancer. So she came back to the meeting and was prayed for again. And then she went back to the hospital the next day and they x-rayed her again. They said, no, really, you don't have any cancer. It's all healed. Says, we'll give you the x-rays if you like, so you can see where you did have it and where you didn't have it and take them back home with you, but you just don't need to come back anymore. And then the Lord spoke to her and said, why don't you give to the minister the money you would have given to the doctor and the money you'd given to the hospital? So she said, well, all right. And she said, here's the money. She handed me an envelope. I put it in my pocket and said thank you, and prayed for the rest of the people, then went up to my room. And that night they had a shift robe there. I hung my coat up into it and put on my pajamas. I was ready to go to bed, and the Lord said, you got an envelope in your pocket. And I said, yeah, but I don't like troubles late at night. It says two or three hundred Hong Kong dollars won't get me across that Gulf of Tonkin over there and get me down into Vietnam, which we called French Indochina at that time, and up toward Tibet. Says, I'd like to just look at it tomorrow morning when I won't be worrying about it. And I started to turn over, and the Lord said, you know, you got an envelope up there in your pocket. I said, yeah, I do, and it could cause me a lot of sorrow, and I'm just going to leave it alone till tomorrow. And I switched off the light, and the Lord said, you got an envelope up there in your pocket. And I said, all right. So I turned on the light and jumped out of bed and went over and into the coat pocket, and I pulled out the envelope and I tore the end of it off and I pulled it up, and it wasn't Hong Kong dollars. It was American dollars. And the smallest bill in there was a $100 bill. And this was in 1935, in the middle of the Depression. I had never owned a $100 bill in my life. I had seen them, but they always belonged to somebody else. And I hadn't seen but a few in my life. And I pulled them up, and there were $100 bills. The only thing in there was $100 bills. They were brand new. She had gone to the bank and bought them, and they had never been in use yet. They even smelled good. And I pulled them up, and I flipped through them. I said, I've never seen so much money in my life. Never seen so much money in my life. And I was so glad it was real. One American dollar in Lin, China was worth 2,500 of their dollars. When I went to get a $100 bill cash, I had to take a suitcase this big and had to push it down and put it in. You know, 2,500 of their dollars for one of ours, and you handed them $100. You walked out of there, you felt like a walking bank, you see. There were 30 of those in there. I wanted to tell Brother Carter so bad I didn't know what to do, but we had an agreement that we couldn't discuss money. I wanted to share with him so bad I didn't know what to do, but he said that we couldn't do that. So all my happiness was inside of me. You should have seen me the next morning at the breakfast table. I'm sure they wondered what had happened to me during the night. I was aglow, you see. And I told them, I'm going to get my ticket today. I'm going to get my ticket today. And so God had performed a major miracle with money. And so God is not limited in his miracles to your physical healing. God is not limited in any way. Peter went down, he threw that hook in, and he came up with a fish immediately. He took the coin out of his mouth, and you've never heard the rest of the story in your life. He took that fish and ate him. Not only did he pay his taxes, he also had dinner. No fisherman is ever going to throw back a nice fish. And so the fish not only provided, he also became the sacrifice.